Welcome back to the show, everyone. As you can see, I'm joined by Patrick Henningsen of 21st Century Wire to break down the latest developments. We're asking whether the Iran war is over. Well, at least the reports are that Donald Trump and his aides, or has told his aides, that he may walk away from the war without a nuclear deal so long as Iran agrees to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in full. He told this to the Wall Street Journal. Now, Iran has been very firm on its demands. It has now many demands that have to pertain to the MOU, including ending U.S. troop presence, ending the war, ending wars of aggression on all of its allies, and, of course, giving compensation to Iran for all of the damages. And Iran last night hit a tanker off the coast of Oman as activity in the Strait of Hormuz comes to a standstill. Just 6 vessels that went through the Iranian designated corridor went through last night. Now, Yemen is escalating its counter-strike and counterattack to U.S. Saudi aggression. It released footage of drone and missile attacks on Saudi proxy forces in day 5 of this renewed war. This includes on mercenary ammunition depots in Yemen's Al-Muqa, which have been hit by 30 Yemeni missiles overnight. And actually, that is being targeted once again as we speak by a Yemeni drone swarm. 58 up to, at least that's what we know of so far, 58 Saudi proxies thus far have been killed by Ansar Allah. As this war, Patrick, has not seen any recession whatsoever. So, Patrick, what's going on? First, let's start with Iran. Is Trump actually walking away, or is this more smoke and mirrors?
I don't know. I really don't know. The U.S. isn't walking away. Trump might be walking away temporarily, but the United States have very clear plans and strategies for this region. They might be going into a delay phase. Look, these politicians are like school children. They need to have their summer vacations. So this is it. This is August. So they all off they go to their second homes or their third homes or their fourth homes or whatever, to the ranch. And so they're gone for August. So the likelihood of escalation during this month with the Western political, the American and the British specifically, they're gone on vacation, basically, boating and things, crabbing in the Chesapeake Bay, if there's any crabs left. So that's not happening. And so and then once you're into September, the logic of escalation from the U.S. point of view, that close to the midterm elections, it's very risky. It's very risky. So they played all these different hands. There could be a few, I think, disparate moves by the Trump administration to antagonize Iran, to basically poke, to prod, to test a little bit, just to remind Iran that the United States is still engaged in the issue. And but the reality is, Danny, you're in America. If the White House just doesn't talk about it for a few weeks, then focuses on something else, whatever that is, then the American public just switches off, and most people will forget there was even a war in Iran if you can given a few weeks. That's just the way the American national goldfish bowl psyche works, just in general. So then it's really taking advantage of this lull in fighting for the U.S. and Israel to restock on really essential defenses, manage to cobble together what they can in terms of interceptors, in terms of ways that the Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem can defend itself in the event of a resumption of hostilities. That's going to happen. And for the U.S., the situation is not great. Iran is being a lot more aggressive. They're not playing this sort of negotiations game anymore with the U.S. So they've been very explicit. We want you out of the region. Get out. There can't be peace until the U.S. is out of the Persian Gulf. So the U.S. can't really engage. Trump can't engage in a war of words over this because he's going to have to back it up with some hard force or some power or something. And right now, Iran's taking advantage of the situation because of the political situation in the U.S. and Israel, and being a lot more aggressive. I mean, you have to kind of marvel at the way Iran has played their hands so skillfully at every single stage of this kind of situation, of this crisis. And right now, they're taking full advantage of the weak footing, the political footing of Trump and Netanyahu at the moment. It's very clear. And so, the U.S. can't come back with some kind of aggressive threat, but you can't kick us out of the Persian Gulf. They can't say anything because the facts are the facts. They don't have a very strong military position anyway. It's incredibly weak. I really think that the blow to the Kingdom of Jordan over the last month has been really devastating for Israel, because the Kingdom of Jordan, separate from the GCC kind of arc on the Persian Gulf, that's Israel's last line of defense, really, in terms of missiles. So they really rely on a robust U.S. presence in Jordan. Without that, Israel's naked. They're really the flapping in the wind. So I think it's going to take time to digest this from the U.S. So it's a convenient time for them to reassess their position, and maybe Trump can make a few copes like, well, we don't need the region anymore, and we don't need the oil, which we are so hot. American economy, it's so hot right now. Everybody wants our gas. Everybody wants our oil. We're so hot. Investments coming in, trillions of dollars, record. No one's ever been more employed than now in America. Our manufacturing sector, oh my gosh, it's never been more powerful since the country was founded. That's what Trump is saying. Like, the dollar has never been stronger. It's so strong right now. And so he's rebuilt the military, It's like, it's just whatever. He does his thing. He's going to do his thing. He's going to say what he's going to say. But the fact of the matter is, it's a very, very, they have a very, very weak hand right now to play. And, it's like they really blew it. The U.S. blew it, because if they had played the MOU game, at least tried to play the MOU game, at least halfway in, they could have finessed their way through on this and maybe even got some leverage somewhere. But the problem is now that the illusion of all that's gone. They blew it. And the Iranians aren't going to play the game anymore with them. So that was the one last chance of some kind of at least a facade of diplomacy that America could have kept their foot in, and they absolutely blew it. And between Vance, Trump, Bessent, and Rubio and the rest, they just shot themselves in the foot 3 or 4 times, and that's it. It's over. So that whole ruse, they basically, there's nothing that can be resurrected from that whatsoever. Because Danny, the thing is, the whole thing with the MOU is, it was always going to be the outcome that the Strait of Hormuz were going to be settled without the United States. That was already implicit in that agreement. And so the only play that the U.S. has left, which could come later, is to apply heavy pressure on Oman in order to muscle their way into Oman, to threaten them, perhaps stage a provocation that will create a U.S. landing on the Omani side of the strait. And then that would be kind of maybe a coup. I mean, we might be venturing into this territory at some point in the next 12 months. I wouldn't rule any of that out with this administration. They'll play every single last tactical angle they can to make it seem like they've still got some kind of cards to play on this, and kind of wash away the absolute shame and failure of starting a war that they couldn't possibly win, and having that on their record. So the U.S. has to keep itself in that region somehow, and how they're going to do that, they do plans to try to do this. But how they're going to actually do that remains to be seen. So there's a few. They played this hand with Saudi Arabia, Danny, which was to pressure Saudi Arabia to engage the Yemenis, and also to attack Iraq. But that was mainly a U.S. military strike, beginning to find out. So and now the Iraqi prime minister's launched a formal complaint with the United Nations. I mean, so
Yeah.
this is not going well for Saudi Arabia.
No.
But that was U.S. pressure, and it shows you how disjointed Saudi is, like as a government, as a state, as a regime. They're really, they don't have any kind of real solid continuity. They're supposed to be the regional hegemon, but they're really unstable. If someone like Trump can just like put his thumb on them a little bit, and then they commit economic suicide, like worse than what Germany did with the Nord Stream pipeline.
Right.
That's not a very stable regime. Acting against their own interests economically, geopolitically. I can't believe they did that. And so they must have some compromise on MBS, or there must be something going. Trump himself is probably hugely compromised as well. It's like a daisy chain of compromise between Israel, the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and whatever. And you got the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein, or maybe not, who knows? But just sitting there wringing his hands. Job well done. So yeah, we'll see.
I mean, I remember those days when Saudi Arabia was so tough with Biden, right? They received him very coolly, and things were tense. And it seems like under both Trump administrations, things seem to change quite a bit in terms of the optics here. The optics look like Saudi is doing exactly what the U.S. says when the U.S. decides to say it. But to the point about Iran, and Iran getting tougher. I mean, here are some of the this is the price tag now for ending the war. So not just an end to the war, lift the blockade, in the sanctions, obviously, get all U.S. troops to withdraw, unfreeze the Iranian assets, reparations, and an end to attacks on regional allies. And now Iran is being very specific that it's Palestine, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen. So very specific about who is involved there. Iran has completely ruled out negotiations with the Trump administration at this point, according to multiple reports, including, I believe now also the spokesperson for the foreign ministry has also said that they are just going to wait out Trump's term. They don't want to negotiate with this administration. And today, right before we got on, the Wall Street Journal reported that $13 billion in damages or $13 billion have been spent on this war, and that the damage has been massive. 20 U.S. Military facilities across 8 countries, 42 U.S. aircraft from 2,000 Iranian missile and drone attacks from this war. So I've seen upwards up to 9,000 be reported in terms of what Iran fired at U.S. bases in Israel. But nevertheless, Patrick, Iran is getting tougher. And they just promoted Mohsen Raisi, who's very much. They call him a hardliner, but for me, I don't know much about his history, but I do know that in the last couple years, he's been at the forefront of advocating for a very tough Iranian response to U.S. and Israeli aggression. So your thoughts on this? Iran getting tougher despite the fact that it seems like the United States is right now, as you said, maybe waiting things out. We don't know what the U.S. is really doing right now, but we know what Iran is doing.
U.S. is doing what it can, and that's not a lot right now. But given time, they can just recalibrate their strategy and create some kind of a future problem or crisis or provocation that they can kind of rally around. But they're also going to have to, at some point, they're backpedaling on their main sort of thesis, which is Iran can't be allowed to have a nuclear weapons. A lot of people are calling them out for this now, and it's not working. So this kind of, it's a straw man talking point. The administration was effective because, in a way, what that does is it says that, this is so high stakes. This is about the denuclearization of Iran. In other words, we can't have another nuclear bomb, Islamic country with a nuclear bomb in the region. That's why we launched this undeclared war of aggression with the Israelis. We're doing God's work, trust us, kind of thing. And that's why they always had to issue that talking point. It keeps the door open for a preemptive nuclear strike against Iran under the sort of aegis of, we're preventing a nuclear threat in the region. So it's very insidious bit of propaganda. But yeah, so they're backing off on that a little bit. I know Trump even gave some ground on that in a recent statement, saying that well, we might have to come to some sort of interim arrangement, and we might not be able to get Iran's full denuclearization. But as long as the strait's open, we'll be happy with that. So, like, how do you define the strait being opened? It's not about it being open. It's about whose control will it be under? Will it be the Americans be meddling in that, or will it be Iranian and Omani, or it's effectively Iranian control over the straits? We'll see. So the Iran's basically also saying we're going to get paid. We're going to get paid. There's not going to be peace until we get paid. Give us our money. And they're being a little more assertive about that. And so all of this talk, they're floating Jared Kushner's bright ideas about parlaying frozen assets to hand to U.S. farmers, so that the Iranian people can get food stocks. They're treating them like Venezuela, basically a country with zero sovereignty, saying that we're going to take your oil, we're going to sell it, we're going to keep it in an account, and we're going to decide if you get any of that money or not. That's the deal that they have with the Venezuelans, and that's to help the Venezuelan people because Maduro was allegedly stealing all their money as a drug kingpin. Of course, that's completely fake, but they're trying to treat Iran with that level of contempt that they do Venezuela or Cuba. And it's just not going to work. They can't bully Iran. The U.S.'s position is so weak now in the region. The thing that's amazing about this, aside from what you just showed, that list of U.S. damage and the cost and all the rest of it, you have to be absolutely certain the Pentagon are going to underreport everything. Not just casualties and dead soldiers. That's expected, but we're talking. What about equipment losses? What about how many fixed-wing aircraft have been lost? What about fighter jets? What about other really key essential equipment and facilities and resources? That damage, I don't think, will be fully reported. And because at some point this is biting the United States military operation, so they had all of this stuff in place, before February 28th, and everything is the interoperability of all the U.S. bases, every single facility, all the ones you just mentioned there listed, each play a pivotal role and are interconnected in terms of operations with other things. For air power, for the U.S. Navy, capabilities for potential deployments and stuff like that. It's a very delicate, interconnected system that they couldn't have possibly foreseen. They clearly hadn't. They clearly couldn't foresee it, because if they did, they would have been able to defend those positions. But as you can see, they weren't able to defend any of those positions. Ergo, they didn't foresee that anybody in the region would do what Iran was going to do, was capable of hitting hard all of those U.S. positions. So that means that's going to hurt U.S. military operations. So right down to the planning and operational level, it just basically reduces their options down to like really just a handful of options. That's the problem they're facing, plus all their covert, clandestine operations that were being organized, that were being also launched and deployed out of northern Iraq, out of the KRG, Iraqi Kurdistan. That those have been wrecked as well, and those were like U.S. joint, Israeli joint, NATO intelligence joint with European, like the French, for instance, and probably I would imagine Ukrainians, because that's the sort of new foreign legion for NATO. I'm sure they were active there, and so now those are all kind of being wrecked. So that's a huge, like, the element of surprise, and that reduces down the options. Now, what can you do? Put ATACMS and HIMARS in Turkmenistan? The Azerbaijani role, it's very tenuous. It's very difficult for Azerbaijan now. Now it's a problem politically for them. to be involved or to be seen to be enabling or facilitating or even allowing their airspace to be used for an attack on Iran. The blowback for Aliyev and his regime could be severe because Iran would not hesitate in responding if that were the case again. So you look at the grand chessboard in this part of the world. It's not great. It was great before for the U.S. and Israel. They had all these different attack vectors and paths, and we could mount various types of attacks on Iran. But now you're reduced down to really, I think, long range bombing runs out of Germany. If they activate, there maybe some governments aren't too keen, like Romania doesn't want to be used. Kosovo doesn't want to be used. Why is that? It could be there's a lot of problems with that potentially. Islamic countries, full stop. Turkey is not going to be allowed to be used as a lily pad for the U.S. to attack Iran. So there's those issues that come creeping in. Politically, it's a disaster for Italy. The exposure of the Mark Rutte boasting of all these different flights that took off out of the blowback has been severe on Maloney, and then we found out that they've been basically backing Israel through the back door, and that's a disaster. Greece as well, that's a little bit close to a little bit too close to home, a little bit too close for comfort there. So you've got Germany, you've got Britain, you've got a couple of other potential locations. That's it. Not great. Israel, that's not great either, actually. So, look, but we're seeing there are things that can be done in the region to stoke up instability, like in Ethiopia, for instance. That looks like that might be heating up again. The United States might be able to parlay that instability somehow. We'll see. But it's not great. It's not great right now. So I think, they're going to need time to reorganize themselves. You can't wage a war through naval assets alone, and KC-130 air-to-air refueling, and that's basically the entirety of the solution for the U.S. military for projecting force against Iran. It's not great. It's not great.
Yeah, and before we move on to Yemen and then the broader situation, I want to pull up what Trump said in response to the claims or the reports that Iran is demanding far more now than maybe they were, or maybe getting more specific with their demands on the United States. He said, "I see that the representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran are asking for compensation for the damage done to them during the last 5-month military conflict. Started because they will not have a nuclear weapon, even though it was never mentioned in any of our negotiations or meetings." I mean, that's the gist of it. He claims this was never mentioned. And then he says, after demanding that Iran should pay the United States for all these decades of something or other, some damages to the U.S., he says, Iran should be responsible for the death and damages of Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria. I mean, final word on Iran, Patrick. This is, of course, the United States is not serious about negotiating, and Iran is not at all naive about that. But at the same time, it is quite something when the U.S. president himself takes to social media and essentially reveals that he's not serious about not only not negotiating, but serious maybe about this issue at all. Your thoughts?
Well, you have any doubts about that? There shouldn't be now. So negotiations with Iran are finished, but relations are still open. So there's a difference between those two things. So Iran will leave the door open for relations, but in terms of negotiations, as we said, the U.S. kind of burned their opportunity there. And I don't think that was ever a serious, the MOU was not even a serious, genuine offer anyway. But relations, yes. And quietly, you could see some deals for unfreezing Iranian assets, especially the ones held in Gulf countries, and anything there. And beyond that, though, it's going to be, I think, difficult for Iran. But hey, they have an absolute case to make. But the what's clear is that the U.S. has reached the limits of this type of warfare and power projection by trying to basically manage two major conflicts, two major conflicts with the Ukrainian theater and then this war in Iran. Israel is the kind of equivalent of the Ukraine as a U.S. proxy, requiring all of the U.S. arms, requiring the United States to defend it ultimately and keep supplying it with missiles and Patriot missile batteries and money and support and provide a kind of, let's say, strategic depth, additional strategic depth. That's what kind of U.S. and NATO provide for Ukraine a little bit. But in Israel, that the U.S. absolutely provides strategic depth for Israel. And it's all predicated on this type of this way in which they're fighting and the configuration and the array of military assets that they had positioned around the region. And so now both of those things simultaneously. So what's interesting is both Russia and Iran are in very similar positions right now, slightly different, obviously, conflicts, majorly different conflicts, but they're both in very similar positions where they both can be, they're both quietly in the ascendancy, and they both can be more aggressive now. They both can be more preemptive now, and they are. And it's clear that the limits to what they were trying to do, propping up Zelensky, the facade of Ukrainian military power has collapsed effectively, and the political facade won't be far behind. It's not far behind. That's coming as well. That's a reckoning within what's left of Ukraine. I think that's going to be a very rapid and swift and devastating for the Zelensky regime. And that ultimately will provide the instability that will allow Russia to achieve its core objectives. So for Iran, their core objectives are to evict the United States out of the Persian Gulf, first and foremost. What's interesting is the announcement of the what some people are calling the Islamic NATO, alliance of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan, and I don't know if I left anybody out there, but it's not. I wouldn't call it so much an Islamic NATO as a Sunni NATO. The question is, who is that alliance meant to defend against? That's the question. Is this against an Iranian threat, or is this against an Israeli threat, or is it being used as a bulwark to send